When I collapsed at work, the doctors called my son. He never came. But my daughter-in-law posted a photo, finally, a day without the drama queen. So I made one call and sold something they thought was theirs. Who's dramatic now? The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed like angry insects as I scrolled through social media from my gurney. Heart palpitations, the doctor had said, stress-induced at 63 apparently. My body had decided it was done pretending everything was fine. The notification popped up on my phone just as a nurse checked my Melissa had tagged me in a photo. How thoughtful of my daughter-in-law to remember me during my medical emergency. I tapped the screen expecting maybe a get well message. Instead, I found a perfectly staged family dinner photo, David, my son, grinning at the head of my old dining table, Melissa radiant in the chair I used to occupy 12-year-old Chloe, my granddaughter, laughing at something off camera. They were in my house, well, technically their house now, enjoying what looked like an elaborate, homemade meal. The caption made my chest tighten, worse than any heart palpitation. Finally, a day without the drama queen family dinner is so much more peaceful, bless family. Shoe drama-free. 47 likes already. My sister-in-law, Nancy, had even commented with laugh-crying emojis. I stared at that phone screen for a full minute, letting the reality sink in while I was lying in an emergency room alone. They were celebrating my absence, not worried, not concerned, celebrating the nurse returned with discharge papers. Your son is coming to pick you up, right? I looked at the timestamp on Melissa's post 20 minutes ago, right around when the hospital would have called David. He knew exactly where I was. He'd chosen the family dinner instead. Actually, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, I'll call a taxi. As I waited in the hospital lobby, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I called my real estate agent, Barbara. It's Eleanor Hartwell. Remember that house on Maple Street? You said would sell in a week. I'm ready to list it. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this mess. 3 years ago, I thought I was being the perfect mother. Turns out I was actually being the perfect fool. Like most stories about family betrayal, it started with good intentions and ended with me learning exactly what I was worth to the people I'd loved most. It began right after Tom's funeral. My husband, of 35 years, had left me the house, his life insurance, and enough savings to live comfortably. I was 60, recently widowed, and suddenly very alone in a 4-bedroom house that felt cavernous without his laughter filling the rooms. David had been so attentive during those first weeks. He'd stop by daily, sometimes with Melissa and Chloe, bringing groceries and checking on me. I thought it was grief bringing us closer together. Mom, you shouldn't be rattling around in this big house all by yourself. He'd said one evening as we sat on the front porch, it's not healthy. Melissa nodded sympathetically. All those memories everywhere. It must be so hard. I'd appreciated their concern. The house did feel overwhelming some days. What if David continued? We moved in here temporarily, just until you decide what you want to do long term. Chloe could have the stability of staying in her school district, and you wouldn't be alone. The idea seemed perfect. I'd downsize to a small apartment nearby, let them take care of the house, and still have my family close. It would just be temporary. Melissa assured me, until we can save enough for our own place, maybe a year at most. I should have suspected something when David immediately started talking about property taxes and maintenance costs, how the house was such a financial burden for me on a fixed income. Never mind that Tom's insurance and investments meant I was hardly struggling financially. Within 6 months, they'd moved in completely. I'd rented a 1-bedroom apartment across town, paying monthly rent while they lived mortgage-free in the house Tom and I had spent decades paying off. But here's what I didn't know. Then they'd been planning this from the start, while I grieved. They'd been systematically redirecting my mail to their new address to help manage my affairs, bank statements, credit card offers, investment notices. Everything started going to my old house where they could screen what I saw just temporarily became 2 years, then 3. Every time I mentioned them moving out, there was a new crisis. David's job was unstable. Melissa was pregnant, false alarm, but they'd already planned for a nursery. Chloe was struggling with middle school transitions. I started to feel like an intruder in my own former home. Visits became awkward. My belongings disappeared into storage or donation piles. They updated the decor, painting over wallpaper. Tom and I had chosen together. But the worst part wasn't losing the house, it was becoming invisible in my own family's life. Barbara Henderson answered on the first ring at 70. She'd been selling houses longer than most real estate agents had been alive, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Eleanor, I was wondering when you'd come to your senses about that property. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I want it listed immediately. How immediately are we talking? Because that house will have offers within days, but we need proper preparation. I thought about Melissa's social media post, probably getting more likes by the minute. How fast can you get the paperwork ready? Barbara laughed, the sound sharp with approval. That's the Eleanor I remember from the PTA fundraising wars. But honey, even with rush processing, we're looking at standard disclosure periods, 30 days minimum for closing, assuming cash buyers. Reality hit me. This wasn't going to be the dramatic same-day eviction I'd fantasized about, but maybe that was better. Better meant more thorough. Fine, but Barbara, I need complete discretion until we're ready to list, and I need to understand my legal position. Smart woman, I'll bring my attorney friend Patricia Morgan, she specializes in family property disputes. The next morning, Barbara arrived at my small apartment with Patricia, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who radiated competence. Eleanor Patricia began spreading documents across my tiny kitchen table before we proceed. I need to understand the living arrangement. Was there any formal lease agreement? Any documented rent payments? No, it was just family helping family. Patricia exchanged a look with Barbara. That's both good and bad news. Good because you retain full ownership rights, bad because they might try to claim tenant protections or even adverse possession after 3 years of continuous occupancy. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. What does that mean? It means we need to be very careful about how we handle the eviction process. And Eleanor, you need to know they will likely try to fight this legally.